Have you ever had one of those days where you just feel like you don't want to do anything? Like you just sit there and you try to get yourself to do something, but you can't even get out of bed. I've had a lot of those days because I felt really stressed and under pressure, and I've just felt really burnt out. Like you feel like you're alive, but you're not actually alive, and you're just forced to do something throughout your mundane day. And you also know that if you don't do something, well, you have a mountain of work to get back to when you do eventually recover from this burnout. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of those experiences, and most of them come from usually my pressure to just not accept failure or to be scared of failure. And I've always wondered since I was a kid why I was so obsessed with that topic. I mean, it's weird, right? Like, do you ever see a 5-year-old just wondering, oh, why did I fail? Like, you don't see 5-year-olds thinking about that. But I did because guess who was raised by a stereotypical Asian tiger mom? If any of you have seen Turning Red and you see you've seen the main character's mom, that's kind of like my mom, right? So I was, born into this world, and I was always really felt pressured to be perfect or to at least not fail and be at least mediocre at best. And that, in a way, has really damaged my perception of myself and my success and what I'm able to do. So going back to that burnt out example. So whenever I'm burnt out, I like to just go on my phone, go onto YouTube, and look at those like really cringy motivational videos. You know those ones where like the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's like, I woke up at 3 a.m. today, and then for 2 hours I meditated and did the yoga, and I really got into my brain space. And then for 5 hours I journaled and really looked into myself before starting my day. You should be like that too. Yeah, I look at a lot of those. And sometimes those do help. Sometimes they actually do get you enough power to get up out of bed and at least go do something rather than nothing. And that's motivation. But the thing is, there's a difference between motivation and there's a difference between motivation and there's a difference between discipline. And it sounds obvious, but a lot of people like to think that external factors that give you encouragement and give you motivation to do something like those videos are true discipline, and it's really not. So the real question is, how do you even build discipline, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he is really disciplined. Have you seen his, arms? Have you seen his, chest? Bro is ripped. But, if that's not discipline, and if his advice isn't discipline, then what is? And I think the answer to that is just accepting failure. I know it sounds really cheesy, but the way you build success, or at least what you can define as success or growth, is building discipline. Now, this is kind of where my mom comes into play, because her definition of discipline and motivation is completely different from mine. And if you know me, or if some of you guys are my friends and you've met my mom, you'll know that we're really different from each other and we're complete polar opposites. To give a little backstory, my mom, when she was just my age, I'm currently 17 right now, when she was my age, she was at the most critical point of her life because she was trying to prepare for the Korean SAT, the Sunung. And everything was going well in her life until one day she came back home and she saw different people in her house, like complete strangers. And people were moving things out of their house and she couldn't find her family anywhere. And so after she asked the moving people what was going on, they told her that her father, aka my grandfather, had gambled away their life savings. They were not really in the best economic position, and now they had a lot of debt to pay back to the bank. And basically, she had no property. She didn't really have a home to call hers. She didn't have a family anywhere at the moment that she could find that she could call hers. She basically had nothing. And it was very confusing for her. So the one thing that she was allowed to keep, that was technically at this point the bank's property, was her desk and her desk lamp to study. And so she studied hard. She studied hard for multiple months on end until she took the Sunung and she was able to go off to 고려대학교, which is Korea University. And, that's like a very typical, or I guess not typical, but a stereotypical way of defining success in Korea. You see a lot of tutors, a lot of teachers, and just a lot of motivational speakers in general telling about how they used to stay up until 5 a.m. They didn't work out at 5 a.m., but they stood up until 5 a.m. and they studied until their fingers cracked, all that. I'm pretty sure some of you guys may be very familiar with the type of motivational talk I'm saying. But that's the kind of story that I grew up with. If I found a math problem to be hard, instead of telling me a pretty much different way to approach the problem or solution, my mom would just be a little bit frustrated with me because she didn't understand why I was so, I guess, incompetent. It sounds a little harsh, but it's true. She would always tell me, well, practice makes perfect, and if you just try hard enough, you're going to get there. And that is not entirely false, but that did put a lot of pressure on me ever since I was a kid to really try and be perfect, not just to please my mom, but because I thought that genuinely was a way to build discipline and be successful. And so that was little 5-year-old me, 5-year-old Jade, playing in this in the playground, thinking that was a way to grow and be successful, but it really was not. Because admittedly, my mom's situation is very different, and I guess she didn't realize this because, hey, parents aren't perfect, right? Parents are also people, and this is her first time parenting. So I guess from my mom's perspective, she thought that this was the way to teach her kids, aka me and Sylvia, my sister, to be successful, to be strong and independent and grow. And yeah, that did not really turn out well. I suffered from a lot of anxiety and a lot of even some depressional symptoms ever since I was a kid, and it really affected the way I looked at myself. It affected the way I learned to interact with people, and it really just affected my confidence overall and how I perceived myself. And I still deal with those problems a lot today. And so one day I decided that I had enough. I was sick and tired of being lazy and not doing anything, but then also feeling like I should be doing something rather than nothing. I was really tired of living up to somebody else's really outdated standards, and I was also just tired of not really being myself or looking at myself too harshly. It's a very tiring and numbing sensation to go through. And so one day I just decided I'm not entirely mad at my mom for this. I can't really blame her for this entirely, but rather I would just leave it up to myself to change it with habit. I don't want to think about it anymore. And so that's the thing. Sometimes you overthink, and sometimes you think that the more you think about it, the more you're going to get a solution. But that's not really the case. That is what I would define as perfectionism, and that is in turn what my mom would define as growing and, being strong or independent. So that there's a very clear difference. I decided that I wanted to change, and I was sick and tired of this, and I just decided to start taking little steps. For example, making little habits, setting goals for myself. And I would not tell my mom any of this. My mom would come in my room and be like, "Did you finish math? Did you? Okay, good." And I'd be like, "Yeah, I did." And then I would just take a little longer than the time I promised to finish all that work to work on it harder, because to be honest, my mom doesn't need to know how much time it took for me to finish it, right? She might get mad if she knows I took 5 hours to understand a math concept. I am not good at math. But, well, the point is I did it myself. I solved one problem, I stuck with it, and I solved it, and I finally was able to teach myself what I was not understanding. These are little steps that I took to try and better myself and slowly start to distance my standards with my mom's pretty much outdated standards, and try to grow as a person in general. I know that this is kind of common in Korea or just in Asia in general, but this is also a case-by-case situation. Not every parent is like any other parent. I'm pretty sure even though some of you might have similar experiences, they're still very different from each other. But I think I can say one thing confidently. Stop thinking about it. Just don't think. Don't think. That is one thing that I kind of regret my mom telling me, because the more you think about it, the more you think about a problem that to you might be very hard to solve, you can't solve it. It creates this mental block in your mind, and you can't solve it, you can't grow, and you just continue to stick with that mindset for God knows how long. And that was basically me from 13 to around 15 until I was pretty much sick and tired of her standards and her way of telling me what to do, when I knew deep down inside that that's not really how I should grow, and that's not really how I should develop as a person. And Well, it is hard. It is hard to approach our parents and their standards and tell them, yeah, your standards just don't work for me. Because again, parents are also people, and this is probably their first time actually being a parent and actually trying to lead someone that they should be responsible about and trying to help them grow as a person, right? That being said, and going back to my idea about just not trying to think so much, just don't talk about it. I know it sounds very rebellious and it sounds like I'm trying to be very emo. I promise you this isn't a phase. But it's not a phase, Mom. But just don't talk about it with them because obviously your ideas and their ideas are very conflicting. And so if it comes to a situation where you attempt to talk about it and it just doesn't solve, just take little steps to change yourself and show your growth and progress with action rather than words. I know a lot of the times, especially in like 90s sitcom like Full House, some of you might know that, the parents and the child, wherever they have a problem, they're always like, walk with me, talk with me, let's figure this out together and let's talk it out. Yeah, good luck trying to do that with a 50-year-old Asian woman. That's not going to work. So just do it yourself. Show it through action rather than words, because eventually the more you pursue something rather than just think about it, the more it becomes true. And I slowly started to notice this a lot with my mom. I started to notice that I was more confident in myself. I was starting to see myself more objectively rather than emotionally or just being sad all the time. And most importantly, I was able to change a lot of my social skill problems, my social anxiety, and just all the issues that I had built up ever since I was a kid in general. And to this day, I'm pretty proud about that. And I don't really think that would have been possible if I wouldn't have taken little steps and taken responsibility to fix that myself before approaching with my mom and talking about it with her and sitting it down and just trying to talk things out. Now, my mom does understand that her idea of perfectionism or her idea of discipline and growth is completely different from what me and my sister should be taking. But I think that's also growth. That's also growth because now my mom has learned to accept things rather than to think that her experience speaks for everyone else. And so just to conclude, just two things. Don't overthink, and the less you think and the more you do with action, the better the results are. Thank you.